In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to rappel into a crevasse and ascend back out using minimal gear. Now, there's nothing really simple or casual about doing a rescue like that, so I've picked my deck here in northern Vermont, long ways from the nearest glacier, but this is a good place to practice before doing this in a more realistic situation. Hopefully this isn't something that you'll ever have to do for real, but like any rescue system, it's a good idea to practice it ahead of time and get comfortable with it. So what I have here is a rope going over the edge here, going down to a pack, which represents my fallen climber. This goes back to a solid anchor that I built, so this person is secure and safe, and it also acts as my belay line. I have two Prusiks, which I generally like to pre-rig onto my harness when I'm traveling onto a glacier. And I'm also clipped into the rope. And then I also have extra rope that was in my backpack, which I generally leave at the anchor point. This extra rope ensures that I'll have plenty of rope to reach my fallen climber. Because my first option would be to lower the rope down to this person, and I could use that rope that they could either ascend out on, or I can pull them out on that rope. Now in this situation, we're going to say that the person is not able to help themselves or to attach themselves to the rope for some reason, so I'm going to have to rappel in and help that person out. Before I rappel into the crevasse, I want to prepare the lip of the crevasse. I generally like to use an ice axe for that. That'll keep the rope from going into the lip of the crevasse, and it'll also reduce the amount of friction if I'm doing a haul system to take that person out. So I'd put the ice axe into the lip of the crevasse, I'd clear the snow away, maybe with a shovel or with my feet. And then to keep that ice axe from falling in to the crevasse, what I like to do is have a leash that's on my ice axe, and I often carry a trekking pole, and I take the basket off, which I can use for probing for possible snow bridges or check out the lip of the crevasse, and then I can ultimately use my trekking pole to anchor it into the snow. Something I'll point out is you want to have a little bit of distance between the rope where the person fell in on and where you're going to rappel, so that way you're knocking snow on top of them. Perhaps 3 or 4 feet, because you want to be close enough that you can reach the person once you're down in the crevasse. So what I've done is I've undone the coils in my rope. I'm going to throw this into the crevasse. Just as a safety precaution, I'm going to tie a knot into the end of the rope. And then I'm going to disconnect from my clip in, take this figure 8 out, and then I'm going to set up a rappel. I typically don't bring a rappel device when I'm traveling on a glacier unless I'm anticipating any technical climbing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a moocher hitch, and I'm going to rappel single-stranded on this rope. And I'll have my two Prusiks here as a backup, and eventually I'll be ascending out on these two Prusiks. What I'm going to do to get ready for that is I'm going to take a double sling, and I'm going to attach it to the Prusik that's closest to me, and this will ultimately be my foot Prusik. And I'm just going to let this dangle off to the side. I like to pre-rig this before going to the crevasse because it's one less thing for me to do down there, and I don't have to worry about dropping it. Alright, so I find that a moocher hitch doesn't offer a whole lot of friction on a single skinny rope like this, especially if it's wet. You could put a super moocher on here for added friction, but you want to have the ability to pull rope in. So I'm going to leave it as a regular single moocher. And to get extra friction, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a leg wrap. And that should give me the friction that I need to go down into the crevasse. before I lower myself over the edge, I like to give myself a little bit more protection. So I'm actually going to do a couple more leg wraps to back myself up. And a trick I learned just recently is clipping that into my gear loop like this to keep those leg wraps where I want them. Okay. So then I'm going to get myself over the lip, making sure I'm keeping the rope over the ice axe that I would have here. Hopefully I can kick my toes in, maybe have crampons on to make that a little bit easier. I'm going to carefully mind my Prusiks to make sure they don't get hung up and caught up as I'm rappelling down. And when I'm ready, I'm going to go ahead and unclip my extra wraps and leave that one wrap on for the extra friction. Something I'll point out here is if this Prusik, usually the top Prusik, gets jammed up while you're rappelling down, you'd be able to use the leg loop to stand up on the lower Prusik so you can free that up. Alright, so once I get down near where my fallen climber is, I can go ahead and set that upper Prusik and slowly transfer my weight onto that, make sure it's holding. And then what I can do is pull up the rope where I have a knot already tied in, and I can clip that in to my fallen climber. Ideally, I have an extra locking carabiner on my harness that I can then connect into the person. If I didn't have that, I could potentially free up the carabiner that I'm rappelling on and clip that in. The other thing I'd point out here is if I suspected or knew that my person was injured, I would bring supplies that I might need, my first aid kit or anything else. If they were getting cold or something like that, I could bring that down with me so I can help them out. Alright, now that they're clipped in, what I can do is go ahead and attach from the rope. And I've got my Prusiks here. I'll probably have to slide the lower one down, my foot Prusik, so that I can get my foot into the sling. What I like to do is girth hitch this so it stays on my foot better. And this might be hard to do with crampons on, or you might be in a confined space, but hopefully you can do that. And now I am ready to ascend. Slide up my foot Prusik and my waist Prusik, and up I go. Here's a more close-up view of my Prusik ascending system. Again, I have my two Prusiks that I like to pre-rig onto the rope going to my harness. I've got extra loops creating a shelf, and on the bottom one is where I hitch in my leg loop. When I'm ascending, I'm putting my weight onto that upper Prusik onto my harness, and I'm standing up on that lower Prusik with my leg loop. And this portion of the lower Prusik acts as a backup for extra security. So this is how I like to tie up my Prusiks. This is using a 6mm cord. I've got it tied into a loop using a figure 8. You could also use double fisherman's. This is about 5 feet 8 inches, maybe 5 feet 10 inches. If I'm not mistaken, that's about 175 centimeters. And then I have my upper loop here where I tie my Prusik using a figure 8 on a bite. And you want to make sure that this loop is big enough so that you can get in your 3 wraps and then have a little space for your shelf so that you can hitch in your leg loop.